Hello, everyone. My name is Guillermina Noël. Welcome to the Hochschule Lucerne, or to Lucerne University of Applied Sciences and Arts. We are virtually in the School of Art and Design. And today we are celebrating. We are celebrating the end of an academic year. It was a challenging academic year for all of us, for all of you there. We are celebrating the end of a very important moment in young people, that is the end of their bachelor programs. For some people in the schools, also master programs. And we are also celebrating a new chapter for them, that is the beginning of their new life as young professionals. And we are celebrating design education. And I think that that's the reason why all of you are here. If you are here today, it's because design education matters to you, and you think that you can make a difference with it. We all want quality in design education. However, as the first part of the JC special issue in design education show, there is no one answer for what it means quality in design education. But rather a variety of answers. Plurality was a keyword. Different schools have different histories, different contexts, different teaching teams, different values, different learning objectives, and hence different strategies to achieve design education. And that is very valuable, and that is very welcome. There is no one single answer. Design, as many other disciplines, has changed, it has evolved, and that presents new challenges for all of us. We need to discover new ways of doing things, new ways of preparing professionals for a future that we don't know yet how it is going to be. We don't know how design education and how the design as practice is going to be in 20 years. However, we need to educate them to thrive in those 20 years. Some logistics now is good that we are not in a conference hall, so I don't need to highlight where are the toilets. But please mute all your notifications and all your Skype for business or whatever you use, so you are not called in the middle of this meeting. And there are two buttons. One is at the bottom, one is chat, and the other is questions and answers. We are going to have a question. Q&A means questions and answers for those that are not familiar with English. Q&A is questions and answers. Please ask questions, make comments. We will not have time during the conversations to answer the questions, but we are very happy in answering them after and publish them in our website. So please go ahead and ask questions to us. And now let us start at this celebration. I will invite Gabriela, Celeste, Don, and Michael to please introduce yourself very briefly and start this conversation. I will be doing the moderation.
You have to tell which one of us should introduce ourselves.
Gabriela, go ahead, you are mute. Try now.
Welcome to everybody. You can hear me now.
Yes.
Thank you very much for bringing back this discussion on design education to our schools. My school is Lucerne School of Art and Design. We are a very old school, founded in 1877, and I'm really looking forward to this discussion.
Thank you, Celeste.
Good day, I will say, everybody, morning, afternoon, and evening. I'm Celeste Martin, and I'm the Dean of Design and Dynamic Media at Emily Carr University of Art and Design.
Thank you. Don.
I'm Don Norman. I'm probably the youngest program. Our program is now in year 6. The Design Lab at University of California, San Diego. And this is a good time to speak with what excuse me, what Guillermina asked me to talk about. Guillermina was the editor of a recent issue of the journal Shadji, and there'll be a second one coming along. Both issues are devoted to papers on design education, and a number of the panelists today are people who wrote chapters in that first issue. Michael Meyer and I wrote a chapter on the future of design education, in which we talked about the fact that we didn't think that design education today was keeping up with requirements. And so therefore, we made a suggestion for a way to change. And I'm happy to say that we are enacting that suggestion. We have established an organizational committee of 15 people. It is being supported in part by IBM Design and also the Design Lab at UC San Diego. And pretty soon, I hope in the next few days, everybody will receive an invitation to come join us for the working sessions, where we'll have roughly 100 people over probably a period of a year or even more, in order to really review design curricula, but make a set of proposals where every single school will find a home. We're not trying to change the good work that's being done. We simply want to make sure we are appropriate for the 21st century, which means many, many different kinds of schools in education.
Thank you, Don. Michael?
Morning. My name is Michael Meyer. I'm teaching faculty at the University of California, San Diego, with a joint appointment between the business school and the design lab. I am also the faculty director for design education. So as you might imagine, a conversation like this, where we discuss what is design education and where is it going, and how do we need to guide and support that, is at the forefront of my mind all the time.
Thank you very much. So both of you have written an article, and now we have invited Gabriela and Celeste to discuss with you that article. Gabriela, do you have questions for Don and Michael?
Yes, I would be. I am very grateful that you take this discussion back to our school. And I think it's a very important discussion. And I think the advantage of this kind of discussion we have tonight is really that we come from so different backgrounds, societal, political backgrounds. But I think yet we can learn a lot from each other. In this sense, I think the manifesto is something which must be discussed and perhaps even disputed, I think. And my question would be, we are talking a lot in Europe about the third mission of our institutions, not only in design. And there are key issues in it. For example, how we address sustainability. And we come from so different backgrounds. Is it possible to have one curriculum in design to address this kind of really crucial issues for the societies, for the world of tomorrow?
So let me respond. You're correct. It is not possible to have a single curriculum that addresses almost any issue. In fact, even if you just take a traditional field like graphic design or communication design, you can't have a single curriculum that is appropriate for all the schools and all the needs and all the students. So what we are trying to do is not develop a single curriculum. We're trying to develop I call it a framework, but it's a family of curricula in which we say, look, we have many different kinds of designers. So for example, for me, design is a way of thinking applied to a whole bunch of different areas. And my training is in electrical engineering and psychology and cognitive science. And then as an executive in a small computer company, Apple. And so I'm a very different kind of designer than the traditional designers, but we need all sorts. And so what we're going to have is we're going to have a way that everybody can participate and can find things of value to them. And some schools might say, well, we like what you've done and we think we're doing a fine job, so we don't see a need to change. And that's fine.
Mm-hmm. Michael, would you like to add something?
Well, I think that certainly Don addressed the issue of what we're really trying to build is a family of curricula. And it really is critical that we have a great diversity of perspectives contributing to that. And that each school, each institution, each individual has the ability to choose what kind of program they either want to construct or pursue. It's really that diversity of perspectives and diversity of approaches that's going to create the next generation and the successive generations of designers that can really confidently contribute to solution on this broad range of problems, which extend far beyond traditional design challenges.
So there is no one single answer about how to incorporate sustainability. What do we do? Where do we put it? Is it in one course? Is it in all the courses?
Well, let me point out that that's a really good example of sustainability because it cannot be addressed by designers only. Sustainability is a very complex issue that involves understanding the environment, understanding manufacturing, understanding materials, and understanding the business pressures on companies who continue to produce unsustainable devices. So that they often have things that are all easily to reuse, but they bond them together in a way that cannot be separated. So basically, it forms the mountains I have seen in Ahmedabad. We're burning trash, all discarded electronics, burning all day, all night, emitting poisonous fumes. It's crazy. So we have to therefore, this kind of approach requires a multidisciplinary approach. It isn't just designers. We need material scientists. We need politicians. We need economists. We need business schools. Because look, most designers, we can't tell designers we should stop building stuff that is not sustainable because designers are not in a position of power to make that decision. So one of the arguments is we must change the companies and their profit motive and change so they should be looking at the well-being of people as opposed to gross domestic product, which is a horrible measure of a company or even a society. And second, we ought to move some designers up to positions of power so that they can make these decisions. So actually one member of our organizing committee is indeed a C-level, a C-suite level person, chief design officer of Philips, actually. And it's very rare that we have designers at the top level of companies, and that has to change.
You know, it's also interesting. I mean, Don's response provides an interesting example of why we need a greater diversity of people engaged in design education and the practice of design. You know, Don, you jumped to the assumption of sustainability as electronic waste and bearing on these consumer devices. It was an example. Yeah, it was an example, but it was a little telling that that was the first example that came to mind, because you know, depending upon the culture, depending upon the users, sustainability could be defined very, very differently. It might have to do with waste. It might have to do with a cultural sustainability. And having people, designers who understand that they need to reach broadly across all of the different parties involved to define both the problem as well as find interesting solutions. And that's really critical.
Mm-hmm.
Celeste, would you like to make a comment or ask a question?
Sure. I think my question / reflection will carry this conversation forward. I'll start just by saying that I'm joining this conversation from the unceded, ancestral, and current territories of the Coast Salish peoples of BC in Canada. And in responding to Don's and Michael's paper, my initial questions have to do with a number of assumptions that I think the paper makes, and maybe perhaps an omission that I think it would be interesting to consider. About the omission, in thinking about the future for design and design education, I would consider it crucial to include a perspective on the discipline itself that inquires not only about its single dominant trajectory as modern design, but also of its own historical emergence and ecological impact, political and colonial entanglements, and epistemic assumptions that make modern design a design and not all design. I think from this perspective, we could think about the proposal as a future and a change for design in the 21st century, in a particular context, and perhaps independent of other designs, and probably not necessarily their foundations. The assumptions that I brought up are the assumptions of modern design and modernity in general that I see reflected here. The belief in rationality, in expert knowledge, in the real, and the supremacy of the individual, and dualisms such as nature and culture. And I think reflecting on ideas of design justice, I would ask, how can the process of creating these frameworks help us address design's distributions of benefits and burdens between various groups of people? How can it help us recognize whether the practices and lives it encourages reproduce and or challenge white supremacy, heteropatriarchy, capitalism, ableism, settler colonialism, and other forms of structural inequality? And I'm quoting here Sasha Constanza Chalk from their latest book published by MIT Press, Design Justice. So when I look at design education, I look at problematizing the implicit structures of pedagogy. That is, those disciplinary worldviews that frame our investigations, which lead me to further questions of design for what? For what kind of making, knowing, and being? Ultimately asking, how does this framework, or how can this framework contribute to my becoming in the world? How does this design make us and in and with the world? What is the vision of a good life that this design approach can hold and allow me to imagine and to live? And I think, you know, I talked to Dawn and Michael already about my line of question, or where I think I can, you know, provide or open, is a discussion about this, the sort of intellectual commitments or assumptions of this particular approach to design.
Thank you, Celeste. We had a brief email interchange. Actually, for me, it was just early this morning. The points you raise are critically important. And actually, one thing I would like to do in response is to invite you to be part of our effort, because we need voices like you. We need voices from people who are young, people who come from the disadvantaged nations of the world, people who come from a different philosophy. And you represent the Indian tribes in Canada in part, but as you're raising the broader issues. You're absolutely right. Design started as a tool of industry. And look at the name of industrial design. Industrial design, what a weird name, because it was all for the benefit of industry. And the original origins in Europe were mainly craftsmanship, but again, to be manufactured, to be sold to homes. And it was, it is a Western idea. And it's not necessarily, in fact, it is absolutely not appropriate for the entire world. Modernism, and moreover, modern capitalism, and the monoculture that results, where basically, as design is taught in the major institutions all over the world, no matter what part of the world, including India and including South America and including, you know, Asia and Europe and North America and Latin America. It's all the same, because we're all the major people teaching in universities are trained in the same kinds of institutions in Europe and North America in particular, and then branch out to the rest of the world to spread their approach. And it's a monoculture. And it's so indebted, it's so much a part of us that we grew up in this monoculture thinking that the way we think is the natural way, there's no other way. But that's wrong. So I'm learning. I have spent the last year, I think, reading and talking to people, trying to understand the other issues. And some of them are hard for me to understand because they write in a language, they write in English, but in a way of speaking that I'm not used to. And I think it's important that I become used to it, because they are addressing really important issues about basically the evils that the major nations of the world have done to the world, United States included, especially the United States, the monoculture, And the notion that we aim at profit above everything. We don't look at people's well-being and the natural way of life. So you're absolutely right. We have to figure out how we can counter that.
Gabriela and Michael, would you like to add something to Don's or Celeste's point?
I'm not entirely sure how I can add anything to Don's very eloquent response, but I do think that, you know, picking up on one point that you bring up, Celeste, you know, this focus on rationality or rationalism in the paper that Don and I wrote. I think that you know, that reflects a bias that Don and I both have, coming primarily or initially from scientific and engineering backgrounds, which again underscores why it is so important to have a broad range of perspectives and disciplines involved in this. But I think that it's also worth taking a step back and asking, what do we really mean by that focus on rationality? You know, it's really about designers and those engaged in design being able to construct cogent arguments that support a decision between different design directions, so that we can confidently, a team can confidently choose one as being more appropriate than the other, or designers arguing for resources to bring their designs into the world can create that argument to actually demonstrate the value, and also perhaps expose where their thinking is not complete enough or not inclusive enough, so that others can contribute to that conversation, and we can actually come up with a design that is more appropriate and more right for everybody involved.
Gabriela, you are mute.
Okay, I'm very impressed by Celeste's perspective on design and on our duty as art and design schools to deal with the world. And I think it is very important for us in all those discussions not to forget the let's say the other aspects of design, being the aesthetic aspects, being the material aspects of design too, because I think that are part of the roots where we come from. And if we put together the different perspectives, it can be very interesting for what design can have, what impact design can have on societies and on the world. I think particularly on the material qualities, because I think if you think about the future of the world and the problems we have to tackle, we can see that very often this kind of knowledge we have from different perspectives, from different backgrounds, can be really crucial in order to find new solutions to all those different problems in society. And I think that's really what is important for us, to have this discussion together and to add all those perspectives from all those different parts of the world.
Don, Michael, or Celeste, would you like to make a comment?
So I think that it's really interesting thinking about that topic of materiality. You know, we are all physical creatures. We respond to the environment around us, the materials in the environment around us. But I think that, you know, deeper than that, you know, Gabriela, what you were talking about is a particular way of working that designers have that is, in general, handed down as a tacit understanding, a tacit knowledge developed in the studio, where designers learn how to explore what the problem is, what the solution might be, what the materials that they have at hand might contribute to the solution of that problem. It wraps together functionality, emotions, context, the cultural roots of the problem, of the solution, of the materials. One of my great fears is that if we approach this as too much of a rational exercise, an intellectual exercise, or a scientific exercise, that we run the risk of losing something that is essential in the design process and that is uniquely valuable within the community of designers. And so having this balanced focus of understanding how to draw upon the other disciplines, make design very much an evidence-driven process, and also maintain that essential designerly way of knowing, designerly way of working that really distinguishes the design fields from the other fields. You know, if we're able to combine this well, I think that we can move design to be an even more effective, even more sensitive contributor to the world around us, not just the products and the services and the experiences that we design, but also the context in which they're experienced and used.
Mm-hmm. I think it has not only to be tacit knowledge, but I think this might be a kind of knowledge which really leads to a new knowledge about, for example, production chains or the way circular economy works. So I think it's not only irrational, but the old techniques or the material knowledge may really lead to new solutions.
Oh yeah, and if we can take that tacit knowledge and make it more explicit, you know, perhaps there is some of it that simply needs to remain tacit knowledge. Something like the bedside manner that's developed in physicians as part of their training. Perhaps there is something that remains that tacit understanding, but the more that we can make it explicit and make it more easily understood by the students of design and also more accessible to our collaborators in the design process. I mean, if we could do that, that would be a significant contribution to design education.
This is going to be a really difficult challenge for all of us because we really want a diverse representation of people working to help look at the existing curricula and moreover, the existing points of view, which is exactly what Celeste has raised. And I don't know how that will work out. But of course, it's going to be up to the group of people that we converge. And we're assuming it's going to be roughly 100 people in order to do this, from all ranks of design, all genders, all cultures, all ages, all points of view. But it sounds very nice to say that, but when you get them together in a room, even a room like this, a virtual room, quite often there's there's a clash of people and clash of wills and a clash of understanding. But the one hope I have that we might actually reach something is that we don't want a single answer. Mm-hmm. So if we have groups of people who have very, very different views, we don't try to say, well, let's compromise, let's see how we can rationalize it. We say, good, let's represent both points of view and make those as part of the family of design curricula. And therefore, different groups in different places can choose. They can either choose to follow one of them, or they could choose to say mix components from the various views together. So we really are not going to prescribe this is how you must educate, but we want to broaden the range of capabilities and possibilities that now exist in the design schools. The people representing right here, the one school that I saw was different. I haven't been to Celeste school, so I can't comment, is Praveen at NID in India. And that did represent more of the traditional cultural view. At least I felt it did in my relatively brief visit there about 2 years ago.
Thank you very much, the four of you, and I think that we can close here with Dawn and the need to broaden perspective in design and in design education. We can now move to our second conversation, and so I will invite Enna, Carla, Praveen, and Peter to introduce yourself very briefly, your name and institution. so that we can start your conversation.
I do not know exactly whom you would like to start. This is Ina Foute. Pleased to be here this evening. I'm the Dean of the Faculty of Industrial Design in Delft.
Thank you, Ina. Carla?
Oh, hi. I don't know if everybody can see me because I got some problems with the internet. So I'm not sure that I'm in the video. Okay. Anyway, now I can see myself. I'm Carla Spinillo from the Federal University of Paraná in Brazil. I'm head of the research lab on information design systems, and I'm very pleased to be here.
Thank you. Praveen, could you?
Hi, I'm Praveen Nahar. I'm from National Institute of Design in India, Ahmedabad. I've been a faculty member in industrial design, product design, with interest in systemic design. And since last year, I'm the director of the school.
Thank you.
Nice to be here and see so many familiar people here.
Pleasure. Peter, can you please introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Peter Jan Stappers. I am, I just discovered I have a picture of the background of our school. I'm currently Director of Graduate School and Research at Delft University of Technology. I work with Ina.
Good. Thank you, four of you. So you wrote a fantastic article, and I will now invite Carla. Do you have a question for them?
Oh, yes. I'd like to make some questions after we talked a bit yesterday about them. First, I'd like to congratulate both of them for the interesting article. It's really, really enlightening. And I would like to ask the first question I would like to ask was related to the path you take in the article. Consider that the change and obstacles are inevitable when you implement changes, and your article talk a lot about it, especially when the changes imply an educational paradigms. Could you provide a critical view on your experience in TU Delft? What was not that good? What happened that make it more difficult to implement the changes, to go forward in the bachelor degree? This is something that I really would like to listen from you.
Well, thank you for your question, Carla. I have to say that I have not followed the whole path of the faculty and the education. I was trained there in the past, which is quite a while ago, and I'm currently the dean already now for sort of 7 years. And what has been difficult, I do not know whether it has always been difficult. I think the good thing is that we kept the good things and we did build on the good things rather than focusing too much on the challenges. We have a very strong history in product design, and from product design we are now developing further. One of the difficulties, of course, we had is that we have been part of the mechanical engineering. We grew out of architecture. We've been on ourselves. And now we are again on ourselves, I think since 2002. And at this stage, I really have the feeling we have enough body that nobody will ever consider us to be part of somebody else's faculty. Because we have, I think, earned the credits of the good work of integral thinking. And for me, the difficulties are more ahead of me than I think they were in the past. But maybe Peter Jan would like to add something to this, as he has been with the faculty for the last, I don't know, more than my 8 years.
Yeah, 1984. Oh, so that's, I've been there for a while, but not the entire while. The faculty is 50 years old. And I think that the challenges came on the large part from various sides. We're not representative of all of design, but we are a design school at a technical university with a close connection to practice. So which one of those changes was that in the 80s, we noticed that having ergonomics, a sense for people, technology together, but we needed company organization management skills in, and that could be added. I think also around 2000, there was a pressure university-wide for the engineering schools to do more research. And we were taken along in that flow. And that actually meant that we, on all the parts that we put to integrate in design, developed research groups. And it's been a great asset for the development to have this in-house rather than in far collaborations. So I think it's part the ecosystem, and the current challenge actually is that one of the possible contributions that designers bring in this current systemic level with big challenges, etc., is to connect the other disciplines. Because I think one of the interesting experiences is if you bring someone to a problem, if it's someone from a particular different discipline, they can easily say, well, yeah, that's a big problem, but it's not psychology, or big problem, but no, this is not materials engineering. If you bring a designer there, they can say, it's a big problem, let's see what we can do. And I think that's a skill that's really needed in complex issues. It's not that we will solve the problems, but we will have to find our way how to collaborate with others.
Thank you. Praveen, do you have a comment to add or a question?
Yeah. Well, I had some privilege of spending some time at Delft in 1997 when Delft was, of course, industrial design engineering school, but it was taking a big lead in eco-design and sustainable design. And I can see from this article that, it has come a long way, and, it has really kind of flourished in design research and, many fields. So I wanted to ask is, how, as the design enters at the systemic level and where, new competencies are needed, how, Delft being the engineering school, could cope up with it, engineering and design schools, rooted in the, and how, it could expand and connect with very diverse mindsets, diverse skills, and how it is moving forward from here.
Maybe Peter-Jan, you would like to give that a start?
Me? Yeah. Oh yeah, I can. Yeah, well, I think we've seen a few things we had to do with the diversity. I think in 2003, we had to split our master program into 3 because we saw even within our own school, it required more specialization in some areas, but still on a base, on a joint base. That was actually an interesting cultural shift within our own program, because suddenly the master students saw themselves as different cultures, and you notice the differences come out. It was also the time, by the way, that we started the master programs in English and had international inflow, and that also has changed the place. I think up till then, we had still the big idea that we could make one type of designer. Although we did notice that not all of them can draw, and not all of them are as empathic as you'd like, and not all of them have the same values in that. But I think the aim with the bachelor was to keep a solid basis for all, and the 3 masters developed into 3 directions. Whether 3 is, that doesn't cover everything, but it covers what we had. Another move is that I think 6 years ago or something, we started to reach out beyond our own school, partially by making online courses and MOOCs, and also bringing out Delft Design Guide as a book. And that brought a lot of connections back, and a lot of feedback, and a lot of reflection on, oh, there's a lot more happening. So it also helped us to look outward, because I think in the time that you visited, we were very inward looking.
Yes.
And I think that is because we were relatively big, so I could in-house go to an expert on many topics. and suddenly the world became bigger again.
Yeah, yeah, thank you so much.
And maybe I may add something something to this. I think I've sort of have been taught as a basically product designer a long time ago, and I've worked in industry. And currently, what I'm doing is actually designing a faculty. I don't know whether you can say that, but it feels like it, which is very much with the people in the faculty, and not necessarily what I think should happen, but a lot of it is in discussion with others. So you integrate all the needs of people, and then you try and build something out of it. And what we are now trying to build more and more so is what I call crossovers between we have 3 departments and people from different departments working together, because it doesn't matter in the end what department you are actually part of, but it's more people oriented or more technology or more the organization. It's how we work together. And the strength I now start to notice in the faculty, because others start to notice it as well, is that we are a team. We work as a team, and whatever discipline is necessary, we can pull it on board. And we don't need months of talking how to understand each other. We do already understand each other from the start. So we can quickly start to work on the way forward, the solutions or whatever, because the way in which we work and the language we use is similar. And that is so much easier than bringing together different disciplines that have not yet worked together and not yet developed this common approach to things. And that really starts to get noticed now in the rest of the university. Say, hang on, guys, we actually need new designers because we have a blind spot that need to be filled. And you are very capable of bringing these parties together, because we need to create more impact as a university. So whereas in the past, just your own expertise would be good enough, also our government and the subsidies we get ask for ways to prove your impact, which is more than just a solistic article or so. It is a whole integrated concept that you try and build. I hope that adds a little bit.
Yeah.
Carlo, Praveen, would you like to add something to the answers of Anna and Peter Jan, or would you like to ask a second question?
Yes, I do. I listen to me because my internet connection is not very good. So about one thing that Anna and Peter talked about is online learning. So we talked about the MOOCs and how you have experience in Delft with online learning and distance learning courses. Now with the COVID-19 pandemic, this became a reality in several countries, in Latin American countries, in Brazil. Now we have to deal with that. That's sometimes new for some courses and universities. People may be not fully prepared like to teach online, and the students may not have the specific technical possibility to access internet, for instance. So how do you see, I'd like to hear from you, how do you see design courses with this pandemic now and the future, with the possibility of having digital online courses as part of the design courses? How do you see this in the future of design education?
Well, I think we started initially with the MOOCs. Actually, the reason why we made them is to make future students or future teenagers aware of what design is about, and to ensure that when they choose for such a topic to study, that they know what they are going into. So in that sense, it was a communication vehicle, and of course we have used that experience. So it's a communication vehicle, but it also trains our own people in doing this. We were one of the first to take it fully on board. So, and then when one person takes it on, it inspires the others to also get experience in online teaching. We believe it can work to put part of your education online, but not all of it. And I think this whole situation with Corona has forced us to do more online than what we actually thought in the beginning we should do. And it works quite well. So we discover that more can be put online than we did in the past. But we also know not everything can be put online. And we are discovering what is the right balance. And I think in design, as long as it is a non-content, a real design project course, it cannot be all online. It can be partly online. We see the individual work become stronger. We see the teamwork to be less strong. So you can learn knowledge, you can experience a little bit of social interaction online, but it is still way removed from the skills that you learn on campus or when you work in a team. So we need both.
Okay, sure.
I can add to that. I mean, COVID hit us in the middle of the third quarter, and everybody scrambled to keep the ship afloat and keep the car running as it ran. Now, in the fourth quarter, we experienced students in new teams coming together, and that's the human group formation, social dynamics is already a challenge. We're now preparing also for September. We probably still have to be prepared for fully online. And I think one of the things that I've seen in the past few months is a lot of creativity, of course. Everybody is on a crash course of online teaching. We learn more than in all the courses we followed, because now you have to do everything this way. I hope that we get a lot of benefit from this learning. But it's also that I think the successes that I now saw were our graduation students, etc. But they had been trained in their core skills in a very physical way before. And so that they now, with the new tools, can do some very impressive ways of holding co-creation sessions and keeping it lively. I'm quite impressed, but I think we haven't seen yet what that tacit part, that implicit part, that edge of your vision part, the tangible parts, how they do that. And indeed, I don't think we can move that all online. And I think we'll have to learn a very steep learning curve now to get that in a new balance.
Okay.
Yeah, I was waiting for you to mention the keyword co-design. It's the first time it appears. I was surprised that it was not coming. What are the challenges and how do you teach co-design online?
That is actually, I think, one of the biggest challenges. The fact that students have to engage with people, gain their trust. Interviewing is a very shallow word, but these co-creative activities, the way we teach it is very physical, and the way they have to do it is quite physical. I think the challenge now is if they have to do it through online means, we have to equip them for it and we have to teach them by this way. I really hope that we will get chances to engage those physical things. But on the other hand, we have to learn from best practices. And I've seen some really nice acts of creativity there, but I haven't seen them yet from people who haven't been taught by, let's say, physical interaction. And I also see that some of the new tools that are around to support the online interactions come from a very shallow, template-based design thinking source thing. And the risk is that with the online thing, students who easily jump on an easy to use tool or the tips and tricks at the end of the chapter, read those instead of reading the chapter, there's a risk that they mistake using a template for being a designer. And that's something which really has to be in front of our mind when we adjust our teaching.
Yeah, in addition to this, I think it is, I'd say that these people in the team stimulate each other, and the serendipity that then comes out of it in the dynamics, it is wonderful, and that's what we miss online. And that's where new thinking often starts.
Yeah.
Yeah, but one thing I'd like to add is that although I fully agree with both of you, I think several opportunities of learning and teaching should be not missed in terms of be together with the students or they be together interacting physically in the sense. However, as talking about the future of design education, online learning will be part of it somehow. Maybe at the moment, few universities have the experience, but in the future, I believe all of us that are in the academic field should have the knowledge or the experience or preparation to deal with online interaction with the students, online teaching, distance learning, education. So I'd like to hear from you, what are your views in terms of us as lecturers and researchers? How should be prepared for that new reality? Because we are used to teach in the studios, to teach in classrooms. Now we will have also, maybe not only, hopefully not only, to teach online. How can we be prepared to do that in a discipline like design that's based on interaction, based on experiencing the artifacts? So I'd like to hear from you a bit about that, about preparing us for this sort of future.
The first reaction from my side would be actually that is a design question. So there is something that we need to design by experimenting, by testing hypotheses, by measuring whether it works or not. And I think, yeah, basically, and PTN will expand on this, I think we have quite a few of the publications that we write in our faculty actually are design related. So we do research through design in education. So we design within and through education as well. And in doing so, we learn a lot. Although it is sometimes implicit, we do make steps and try and yeah, make it explicit, if you will.
Okay.
If I can add two things, I think one is very obvious. I think we should be able to learn together, and I think Don's initiative and getting the map of the different types we teach design will also set up, make it more easier to share experiences. And the other thing is, this is not the first challenge we encountered. 10 years ago, in Europe, we suddenly saw service design coming around, and a lot of designers said, oh my God, you're making something which doesn't make sound when it hits the floor. That shouldn't belong in our faculty. And of course, it should belong in our faculty, and it was, I would say, assimilated as part of it, but it required the mind shift for quite some people that, let's say, some people call the immaterial is also a substance for design. That's not to say that the material is less important, but the scope has become bigger. And so, yeah, another challenge.
Yeah, big one.
And I think that this is a very good way to close this conversation. Thank you very much, the four of you. I think that it's quite clear that we have a new challenge, a bigger challenge, a different challenge. I will invite now the four next panelists. Luisa Moller, Linus Mother, Jorge Frascara, and Joko Muratowski. Could you please introduce yourself briefly, who you are and your institution?
Who should start? Should I start?
Luisa should start. Ladies first.
Thank you. So hi everyone, I'm Luisa Moller and I'm a Design Management International graduate here from Lucerne.
Thank you, Luisa. Linus?
Yes, so hello everyone, nice to be here. I'm the other student. I'm from Bern originally, but also studied in Lucerne Design Management.
Thank you. Joko?
I'm Joko Muratowski. I'm the director of the Ullman School of Design. That's at the University of Cincinnati. And this is the oldest university-based design school in America. We just hit our 150 years milestone. So that's me.
Thank you. Jorge?
I'm Jorge Frascara. I'm a professor emeritus from the University of Alberta, where I taught for 29 years. And at this point, I am retired, but working part-time, sometimes teaching at the Hochschule Lucerne.
Thank you. Both of you, Jorge, you didn't write an article, you did an interview with leaders in design and design education. So both of you contributed with articles that were very different. However, they have common point. I will now invite Luisa and Linus to see if they have questions or comments, things that they would like to ask you.
Yes, so I will start. You both stress in your articles that it's very important that we have industry experience or that we have close relationships to business partners. So I wonder, how can we strengthen these relationships while being in the university? Because, for example, for us now, for us graduates, we have to enter the workforce, and often we have to do internships first. So I wonder, how can we kind of bridge this, that we can easily or more easily join the workforce and prove them that we can add value to the organization.
You go first, Joko.
Yeah, I think that's a good question for you.
Thank you, Jorge. Well, my school, for example, was established in 1869 with a mandate from industry, actually with a push from industry to kind of set up a program for design that will help make the American industry and economy more competitive, specifically in Cincinnati. At the time, Cincinnati had, it made a lot of sense. At the time, Cincinnati had the largest factories in the world and the most diverse industry in America. So they needed kind of to elevate the work that they were doing, because at the time, the American products were seen far less competitive than European ones. So that's kind of, they went in this direction. And everything was done through that perspective of looking at the industry. I mean, design is different to art. Design is outer directed, art is inner directed. So it's like, yes, you can design for yourself, but ultimately you're designing for other people. So it's always kind of like, that's why you need to kind of have the input. Otherwise, if nobody needs the designs that you're doing, it's useless. So if nobody wants to make what we produce, or nobody wants to create what we produce, we have no reason to exist. This type of relationship between industry and the university was further strengthened in 1906 when when we introduced the first core program, which is now considered like a standard thing in America. But we were the first to introduce this, that students will, as a part of their degree, spend a period of time in industry, and they will be kind of going back and forth, while they're kind of like learning it from the real world and bringing that knowledge into the classroom, and then taking theoretical knowledge and other concepts and ideas and applying them back into industry. So this is kind of where we are. And everything we do is vetted, it's done, it's kind of like benchmarked at industry. However, what we do is not just kind of like following what industry does. Today, for example, we lead industry, we set examples, we set new models. But to do that, we need to kind of have this relationship, and what industry needs to trust us, and they need to trust that the students that we produce have that skills to do that. Because at the end of the day, if you ask any of our students why they're here, is because they want to have a jobs after they graduate. Nobody comes to my school and says like, I just want to do design for design's sake. They all come and say, because you have such a strong pathways to industry, I know that I have the best chance to kind of be employed after I graduate. And true, it's like more than 90% of our students have job spending by the time they graduate. The way we do these things is not just through kind of sending students into industry and sending them back and forth. It's by bringing people from industry and embedding them into our programs. So we get their feedback. I regularly visit industry partners to ensure like that I understand their expectations and their ways of work, and then I kind of like try to bring that back in. But we have them there to sit on studio critiques. We have many cases where we don't even mark the students. We take them to a certain point, and industry people come in and they do the grading based on the industry perspectives. We hire industry professionals. We call it professors of practice, whose sole job is to kind of build certain things that will be kind of done in exactly the same way as they're done in industry. I bring people in like designers in residence. I currently have a designer in residence from Toyota from Japan, who is embedded in my transportation design program on behalf of Toyota, to ensure that the students that we are training there will be ready to hit the ground when they're employed by them. So it requires a larger effort to kind of make sure what you're doing is kind of employable. And I know that I talk about a lot about industry, but the same thing applies whether you want to do design for social change, whether you want to do design for good, whether you want to do design for government. You still need to have the same networks and the same relationships and the same type of things in place if you want to have impact. And these people need to know who they're hiring. If they have no idea what your capabilities are, of course, they will be, unsure whether that's the right choice or not. So we are first choice for industry in so many ways because of this type of long-term relationships.
Okay, I do my take now. Mine is quite different. There are different ways of cutting the pie. What I did in the 90s at the University of Alberta was to create a Bachelor of Design with pathways. This was in response to two things. Industry needs people with different kinds of expertise with a common, let's say, ground in design. So the pathways, by agreement with other faculties, included computing science, engineering, business, and social sciences. And a student coming to the program could take the traditional, let's say, design concentration exclusively, or design plus one of these pathways that could take up to 45% of their program. I did this partly to form these interdisciplinary designers that responded to different needs, but also the program responded to different abilities of the students who came. So that in the end, the graduates had a variety of profiles, which increased their ability to get a job, because they were not all of them fighting for the same kind of pocket. Secondly, in the fourth years, that was the last year, we worked 50% with client projects, so that they learn how to present something, how to understand something, how to talk with a person who was not a designer. So I did not have that intimate connection with industries as like you in Cincinnati, but we did it on a smaller scale. Edmonton is not an industrial center like Cincinnati, but the number of students that we graduated was, let's say, harmonic with the size of the city. But that was a strategy, basically, to do that multi-pronged program to meet different needs and to meet different needs of the learners as well. So what else?
I saw a couple of interesting questions in the chat. One was like, what or who is the industry today? And the other one is like, how do we train for industries that do not exist yet? So I don't know if, Julie, should I respond? Guillermina, should I respond to this? Now or you want later?
I can respond to this, but I would like Linus first to ask the question.
Maybe just a comment on the relationship with the industry. I think this is also as a student very interesting or important, because what we just now also experience as graduated, that we apply for a job or even for an intern and they expect some work experience. So I think also the difference between the universities, I don't know how it is in your countries, but in Switzerland we have like a classical university that is maybe more theory based. And DMI, what we studied, is a so-called Fachhochschule in German, or a technical college, let's say. And here the relationship with the real world is also a central part. And this is something that was also for me as a student, like very important, that I'm not just living in this bubble of university. So this connection, I think, is important. Yeah, just wanted to mention that.
No, I appreciate that. And most of my education is from Europe, so like I never had an industry exposure whenever I was studying in Europe. For me, I studied in many countries. I completed my PhD in Australia and so on. Even in Australia, they barely, were at that time they were not engaging at all. Now they're making attempts to engage with industry, but nobody has this type of model. So when I came to Cincinnati, when I saw that, it was like, these were like my dreams, like my wildest dreams as a student, like just being exposed to these companies. And we work with the biggest companies in the world, so like our students, by the time they graduate, first of all, our degree takes 5 years to graduate. So it's a Bachelor of Science in Design, and it takes 5 years to graduate. And of those 5 years, students will spend 5 semesters at up to 5 different companies. And they could kind of spend 1 semester at Apple, 1 at Nike, 1 at Tesla, 1 at Procter & Gamble, 1 at like, you name it. We have about 1,200 industry partners that they can choose where they can go. And they're paid positions, paid appointments, not like free internships. They're paid actually. So they do real work. So when they come back, they keep us at the edge of the seats. So somebody just came back from some of these like top companies, like we have to up our game to keep them engaged and interesting, that we can still deliver content that after coming from all these companies still going to be relevant to them. So it's a very interesting thing. And the students get incredible amount of experience throughout this process. And of course, they are like immediately employable, because by the time they graduate, all that counts as a real work experience. So I understand your frustrations and where you're coming from. And I had to deal with the same things when I was a student in Europe.
Luisa and Linus, do you have another question for Jorge and Yoko?
Yeah, I maybe wonder, because if you think for us as students, or especially when we start deciding where we want to go, I think costs are an important factor we don't talk much about. And I wonder if you think that cost also is related to the quality of the design education.
You mean cost of education?
Yes.
I don't think, like, if we look internationally at scene, there are schools that are very expensive. There are schools that are not expensive at all. Like, for instance, situation in Switzerland is quite cheap compared to any other first world country. But that doesn't mean that the teaching is cheaper. Let's say, like, whatever gets delivered. In Argentina, university is free, and it varies in quality dramatically from the excellent to the terrible. And some private schools in Argentina are very smart marketing, and they are very successful, but they don't teach anything that has to do with anything that we are discussing here now. It's a very traditional kind of product-oriented, individual, successful, artistically formed designer kind of thing that sells very well, because young people many times buy into a notion of creativity that doesn't require knowledge. And it's very easy to believe that one can have it already from age 7 or something like that. So I don't think there is a connection. I think that you might be able to find, let's say, socially minded country offering very accessible education, and others that are impossibly expensive. Now, if you have the money to get into a top of the line, very expensive university like Harvard, once you come out, surely you find a job. But you need either to find the money as a scholarship, or you need to have it yourself. So it's all over the place. I don't think that there is something you can say, okay, it's not like the red wine, if it is more expensive, while it is better. But you had other question that I was very interested in, that came out in the chat here. That is, somebody said, and you saw it, Joko, what happens with industries that don't exist yet? And one thing that I wanted to respond to that is that the main challenge that we see, and that appears in the article that I wrote with the 8 colleagues that responded, is that we have to form people that are able to keep on learning all the time. So that we have to teach more than what we know. We have to teach how to learn. And I don't think we know very well how to do that. We are learning it. But, you know, design has changed substantially in the last 57 years that I have been practicing. If one doesn't keep on developing abilities to adapt to the changes, one falls off the cliff any moment. So the best skill that you people, you two students, can try to develop is your ability to keep on learning. And we haven't been very good at teaching you that, but I hope you can do it.
That's maybe my question. I mean, your article is about lifelong learning, but I ask myself as a student, is this even something that kind of you should teach, or is it more a natural process? Because I mean, we're as young students, we're already kind of used to a world that is changing so fast. And also, if you have a program, and I think our DMI program was quite diverse with a lot of changes, fast changes where you need to react, that is kind of more a natural process, this lifelong learning.
My take on that is that I think that we should not transfer knowledge to you. We should help you discover knowledge. Let's say we should help you develop your own knowledge, not just say, you know, this is the way to do it right, and you do it like this or like that. That's the wrong approach. And unfortunately, some tools that have been popularized by some studios foster the development of robots, like the double diamond, for instance. You know, is something that is a set of crutches to walk. No, we should form students that can invent their own process, that can design their way of working. And then, yes, conversant with whatever exists, that's good, but not just buy it in wholesale and copy it until they die.
Yeah, I agree with everything you mentioned. That's kind of like same philosophy that we apply. We were very conservative, traditional, hardcore design school here. And then when I arrived, I made a big push for us to kind of become more like that, more experiential learning with very strong focus on research. So now for me, it's like I'm making like attempts to move research as early in the curriculum as I can. And ideally, my goal is to kind of make it as a foundational skill, first semester, first year, because that kind of teaches students critical thinking. Now, it's like, it's tricky, you know, like, especially when it comes to introducing new knowledge, working for new industries and so on, while still you need to be able to be employed in existing industries. And this is kind of like a bit of a trade-off that is not easy always to be achieved. So the way that we do first, for the first 2 years currently, we have a very prescribed model. Like, this is exactly how you do things. You know, this is exactly how you design a product. Everything. It's like a step-by-step processes, which is probably like a gold standard for industry. And we have done this for decades. Many of our alumni are currently in the leading positions in all of these top companies, and they kind of use that model, and they learned it here, and it's kind of like perfected model. But we learned that if they just know how to do that, they won't be really competitive in a changing environments, in new industries, and so on. So we teach them how to do these things, because we send students to industry after the third semester. In their second year, that's where they go, they do the first placement. So they need to kind of know how to do these basic things in order to get this job, because they still apply for these positions. And they need to know that, because nobody will get like a junior designer and just tell them like, okay, now you're gonna kind of set the new direction for the company. They're gonna need to kind of go on the back of the line and do all this work. So it's important for them, in order to get that first job, to know exactly what industry expects from them at that point. But then once they kind of do like a 2 of those industry placements, and they kind of return to us in the third year, we flip the tables and we move completely into experiential learning. where the students, we teach them now, okay, so now you learn this technical approach, you learn how to do exactly these things, and now forget that for a moment. And now let's kind of focus on completely, different things. We teach them how to write design briefs. Before they were being handed a design brief. Now we teach them how to develop design brief and how to do research and how to inform things. And they have to be kind of like, they need to take the leading role, and we take the back seat. So we are moving from instructors to coaches. So now we are just kind of coaching them while they are kind of need to learn how to learn about stuff and so on. And we also work on, we have methodologies for trend forecasting, for future foresight and all of that. And we do employ these things on sponsored projects for industry as well. So pretty much every single sponsored project that we do begins with the words, the future of certain industry, where we kind of do these kind of projections, and we do like a very large scope of research, 360 research, kind of analysis on certain industries and looking where they could be and how design can play a role in that. So, and we kind of put the students from the third year onwards in those scenarios as well by the time they graduate in the fifth year. So this is kind of like how we are balancing that whole thing. But at the end of the day, it all comes down to learning how to learn, because things change so much that you won't be able to succeed if you only have that one particular trait figured out.
A couple of things. We have a minute. So one thing that I want to stress is that in the article transpires that the important thing is not what the teacher teaches, but what the student learns. And the other thing is that learning is learning about things, but the important learning is the development of abilities. So the teaching of things is a means, but the important thing is how the student grows from the day they enter school to the day they exit the school. What tools they acquire that help across the board, not only to do good design, but to live a better life. So how to pass the baton to Guillermina, because I don't know, Guille, is that okay?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Jorge. Thank you, of the four of you, for this dialogue. I will now invite Ken Friedman to close with me this conversation. Ken, could you please introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Ken Friedman, and I'm a professor at Tongji University, and also the editor-in-chief of the journal Sheji, where Guillermina was the guest editor producing the spectacular issue on design education that we've just published, and a spectacular issue that's about to appear.
Good. Can you, when is it appear?
Soon, we're waiting. It's gone to the press, but
most likely first week of July.
We hope so, and that's next week.
Yeah. So, Ken, what is that you were listening in this almost half an hour that we have been having this conversation? What is your take home?
Oh, geez. I think I would have to say that I'm in the same boat with Don. Trying to think through the intersection of how we understand the world and what we should do in it. And I have to say that this operates on three levels for me. What is it that we owe the world as human beings? That is to say, citizens of the world, citizens of nations. Then, what is it we ought to be doing as educators, not just design educators, but educators who work in and are responsible for universities? And then within that, within the problems, questions, and issues that this brings up, there is the challenge of what we ought to be doing as design educators. And for me, the great thing about participating in this project with Dawn, and listening to people in meetings like today, I keep finding out about new things. I've been reading a lot of books. So I'm not sure that I have a take home, except to say I think I'm going home, or actually I'm already home. I'm sitting in my kitchen, but my take home is that I'm coming away with better questions that I got to think about some more.
Nice, better questions. I hope everybody is getting better questions and taking a lot of things home to reflect. I think that one of the things that is clear is that design is now certainly focused on people. Design is for people. The goal of design is to help people. And within that spectrum is that we need to start expanding. Perhaps one of the main shifts that we have seen that design fundamentals is now people. So we have shifted from what were the previous courses in history based on colors and materials to a focus on people. And that presents new challenges because, as we were saying, is design for whom? Design for what? Design how? That are some of the questions we are having to confront now. And within that context, how do we teach that design for whom? How do we teach this new way of a design that is focused on people and helping people, that where diversity is at the center, where different contexts are at the center, where different ways of understanding problems are at the center, where we need new tools to understand new complexity because people are complex and we don't have an answer. We need to engage in reflection. So hopefully some of you will be joining us in the future of this reflection. Would some of the panelists like to say something? Dawn? Anna? Peter?
Yeah, I think it's wonderful to have a discussion like this with so many people from around the world. And I really believe we should maybe have it more often on education because we all seem to be looking for the same direction. Thank you very much for your effort.
Thank you, a pleasure.
I was going to comment that there was an interesting switch in the beginning of the conversation and the session that Michael and I were in. We discussed a lot about modernity, about the very different cultures that exist in the world and very, very different points of view and how we might approach that. And in fact, I just said that, you know, the origin of design really was as a tool for industry, and we have to change it to become actually a growth for people, societies, with the emphasis not on profitability and sales, but an emphasis on wellness and good life and maintaining cultures. But the end, it was all about how do we get jobs. It was actually triggered by the students who naturally are concerned about, well, they've been studying now for several years and where do they go afterwards? But we actually switched back to the more traditional view of design as a tool of industry. And that isn't the only view. It isn't, I'm not saying we should discard it, because as I said before, when we have different conflicting views, we'll have to accept all of them and give the schools their choices. But I still found it was very different, very interesting that the latter discussion never ever went back and looked at the earlier discussion.
What will
Celeste?
Can I interrupt? Sorry. I just think I would add that, you know, following on your reflection, that it is understood that we need to navigate employability, skills, and a broader education that that supports the transformative aspect of education and how we see the world. But if we repeat, if we educate, or, you know, that's a troubling word, but if we set up programs to just uphold what it is, then are we complicit with the problematics of what it is? Like how are our programs also allowing ourselves, our students, to imagine different kinds of possibilities for what it is to have a good life, for what it is to live, right? And I don't see them as divorced trajectories, or either you work for industry or you work in activism, right? But we shouldn't foreclose the possibility of imagining new ways of being, transitions of our industries and transitions of our ways of living into new paradigms. And I think that's what at least my programs at Emily Carr is what they're striving and figuring out how to do. I wouldn't say that we have all the answers, but I think that's a very important aspect of education, that is not just about instrumentalizing individuals for a particular kind of work. Yeah, and I would say, Ishe, I would argue for beyond anthropocentrism. I would argue for beyond human-centered design, because in a way, how we name things continues to establish a dominance of people over an earth that is at tremendous peril. So how do we invoke who we design for, maybe a bigger, broader understanding of how we are radically interconnected with beings, right? Like it's not just about us in this world, or the viability of us should include then that we consider more than us.
Mm-hmm.
I want to change your statement. We shouldn't be thinking about designing for people. We should think of designing with people.
Yeah. I take comment of Patricia saying that we can no longer put people at the center. Of course, when we put people at the center, we put the environment at the center. We cannot isolate from where we are or what is in our ecosystem if we wanted. It's not isolated people and looking at the center of people. Ken, you were going to say something.
Yeah. I was really very much agreeing with what Celeste is saying, and the huge challenge of all the things we've talked about today, so many of these things, is they're all somewhat urgent, and yet at the same time, we're facing a genuine environmental catastrophe. Every time I look at the latest work by the climate research people, they're saying we're getting closer and closer to irreversible tipping points. We don't quite know where they are, but the situation is much more urgent than anyone has realized. So I agree very much with Celeste. It's very difficult to figure out an answer, but sometimes I think to myself, I am 70. My father lived to be 95, and I'm thinking, geez, I believe that I'm tremendously fortunate that I'm not going to be here for more than another quarter century, because the problems that are rushing toward us are huge. And so one of the things that I think has got to emerge from the stuff that everybody like us thinks about is how we can actually find actionable and responsible ways to deal with these issues.
Gabriela,
can I also comment on some of the...
Yes, go ahead, Yoko.
Yeah, so I want to make it clear that there is no one recipe for teaching design education, okay? The design schools over the course of history have been shaped due to a number of variables and circumstances: regional, local, political, socioeconomic, religious, whatever they are. Each different school in different part of the world has been influenced by different things. So they all kind of exist to serve different interest groups. There is no such thing as global design education. in theory, yes. In practice, no. There are a number of, kind of factors that determine how a design school what a design school should do and where they can focus. Even if you look at the different countries, have different design successes based on the type of natural resources they were commanding. And there is like a difference between how design is developed in Italy, let's say, which is a Mediterranean country with a lot of sun and where people spend a lot of time outdoors, versus Scandinavia, where the weather conditions mean that people need to spend a lot of time indoors, which is why you have such a great furniture and so on, to versus even if you break down Scandinavia country by country, from Iceland, which is more strong on graphic design due to lack of resources, versus Finland, that has a great furniture production because of the forests that they have, and so on. So you will, if you start looking on a more granular level, you will understand why design moves into so many different directions. In my school, 100% of the students who come to be employed. And this is like, it's embedded into the DNA of who do we serve, what do we serve, and so on. This doesn't mean that we just work for industry in a very specific, kind of like just, we're there just to serve industry. When I kind of look at things like 150 years from when we started to where we are now, I kind of try to look at things from the perspective in terms of like, if we have to start this school again with the same ideals and same kind of like concept, how will that look today? So I kind of changed the focus without changing the DNA. But for me, it's very clear here that I serve to a specific interest groups and demographics. I often have to remind some of my faculty, my professors, like, why are we kind of spending so much time with industry? We should just work on these abstract concepts of design. I say, well, that's easy for you to say in the ivory tower of this university. But all these students are really worried, are they going to get a job when they come out? So I feel very strong responsibility of making sure that we are producing employable students and that we are creating opportunities for them. But this doesn't mean that we do not kind of encourage broader and more conscious ways of looking at the world. So the whole thing that we do is kind of like finding a balance of encouraging the students' beliefs, because all my students, when they come, they don't say like, I want to destroy the world and I want to work in industry. They all say like, I want to do something good, but I also want to get a job. And say like, okay, let's use this as an entryway rather than you shouting at the doors of these companies and saying, why are you doing such a bad things to the world? You can get a job there and you can change this culture from within. And we bring a lot of sustainability, we bring a lot of social innovation into these things. Everything that we bring back to industry as an influence is a positive change. And we tell them how to be better, how to do, how to do better products, how to do better services, how to help people. Human-centric is what we do at the end of the day. We are very human-centric in our approach, but we put all these other social aspects into that. And I have to say, we do change how these companies operate. Tomorrow, our students end up being in leadership positions in these companies. And then they further make another push on how these companies should behave and do that. So there is like I like to look at this as an asset. The fact that we can go inside these industries and change them from within is a strength, But at the end of the day, no matter what, and I can assure you, my students can be incredible activists, and I deal with this type of things all the time. They're very opinionated about everything, and they have a very strong stand about everything. So but regardless of that, their final call will be, how can I get a job now? And it's exactly the same as the students here have just asked. At the end of the day, that is the reality. There are some schools, private schools, which cost much more money than coming to our school, which is a public school. Some of the students, they don't feel the pressure to get a job after they graduate, and they can kind of pursue more lofty ideals. Not everyone is so privileged. And at the end of the day, you kind of have to balance the realities of life versus ideals, which doesn't mean you have to compromise your ideals. It just means that you have to find a different way to achieve those ideals. So I just wanted to kind of add that for clarity's sake.
We need to move on. Ken and Don, I will ask you to say the last words, perhaps to give advice to the students that might be quite confused now. Where do I go? What do I do? Where do I apply? How do I do it?
Well, I have to say, sometimes if I had any advice, I would just start singing those old Merle Haggard country songs and say, don't do what I done, folks. But seriously, I think there's no one answer. So you gotta read a lot and think a lot and spend time talking to wise and interesting people. That's my best advice.
Thank you. Don?
The world is changing in many, many ways, but not in the way that is necessarily the traditional form of modernism, of moving new discoveries, new industries, new technologies. We have to actually step back and say the world is changing, in part destroying itself. And I keep coming back to Design for the Real World, this wonderful book by Victor Papanek, who started by saying the first sentence of the book was, there is no industry more damaging than design. And that is, we have to change that. Now, how do we do things? There is no answer. We don't know the answers. And actually, I'm hoping that students who are listening to us and wondering why we don't have a particular answer is because these are complex problems. What in my group we call complex socio-technical systems. They are systems and they are messy, and there are no simple answers. Actually, I'm fond of saying there are many simple answers. Every complex problem has a simple answer, and it's wrong. And so what we can do, though, maybe we can improve the world, but it's going to be up to you. And by you, I mean the 110 people or so that were on this call to do it. You don't just look to us, you have to look to yourself. So one of the points that's been made, Jorge started it, was that the most important thing that you can learn in school, besides the particular skills you're acquiring, is to learn how to learn. To always be questioning, to always be asking, to read a variety of literatures that are novel to you, that come from different points of view, and to meet people that come from different points of view. And when you travel, just don't go and stay in the fancy hotels, because those hotels are identical all across the world. In fact, I sometimes wake up in them and say, oh, what country am I in now? No, as much as possible, stay in the small, out-of-the-way places. So I've stayed in hotels in Japan where my wife and I were the only Caucasians, and it was a very, very different experience. And the same wherever we go. I learned in the Netherlands to sleep on the floor in our hotel room, which was so small and we didn't have things. But I also learned other things to do, and you have to keep learning and changing. And admitting when you are wrong. I am frequently wrong. And that's how I learn.
Thank you. I think that's the message, that we need to keep on learning. When you finish studying, you don't finish studying. You need to keep on learning. To the students, perhaps the message is start designing your future. Use your skills as a designer to design your future. For us, educator is, as Anna said, we need to design education. That might be my takeaway message. Don't go ahead.
I just want to comment that this is the richest discussion I've ever seen on chat. And so I'm going to copy and paste it and save it, and I'll send it to you, Guillermina, and I don't know how we might want to distribute it. If you save the chat on the tool that Zoom provides, it is horrible, so don't bother with that. Copy and paste. Zoom has completely failed. They need a good designer.
Ken, you wanted to say something else.
No, I was just putting up a finger to say, I agree.
Good. Will you like to close it now? You have the word.
Okay, well then I just want to say thank you, Will, and to all of you people who have had so many interesting things to say, and to the people who have put these interesting chat comments forward. Thank you all. It's been a tremendous pleasure. For me, a tremendous pleasure.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to all the attendees. A lot of very interesting people are there, and it's a fantastic mix. And thank you very, very much to all the panelists, the ones that wrote articles, the ones that meet with us before, and the ones that are now here. Lots of work behind this. And thank you very much for all your efforts.
And thanks to you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good evening and have a good morning. Have a good night for Praveen. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you all.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank
Bye,
you.
Carla.
Bye. It was wonderful. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.